What's going on, everybody? It's Warren. Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder, and we just watched our very first episode of Marvel's What If. And I'm very curious to hear what everybody thinks about this new series from Marvel, the very first animated series coming from Marvel Studios. Let me know what you rate this first episode 1 out of 10, and let me know how you feel about the animated series. The first episode starts off pretty strong, I would say, and it starts off with Captain Carter. And I have to say that I definitely like Captain Carter. I like the dynamic that her and Steve have, because even though Steve doesn't go on to become Captain America like in the MCU, he does go on to kind of become essentially the first Iron Man, and I thought it was pretty cool how they work together. So this will be my breakdown for Marvel's What If, episode 1. I'll talk about everything that you need to know that happened in this episode, including all of the Captain America callbacks, because this was essentially Captain America the first Avenger with just that one twist, that one event that changed the entire outcome for this pocket universe. And if you loved Peggy Carter as Captain Carter, we're actually going to start off by talking about the possibility of her actually appearing in live action form in the actual MCU. Now, What If, even though animated, actually takes place inside of the MCU. This has been confirmed by people over at Marvel Studios. It just doesn't take place in that main MCU sacred timeline. These are essentially branch timelines that we saw in Loki. But like I mentioned, if you liked Captain Carter, there have been reports stating that she is going to show up in the MCU in live action in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. These reports come from credible sources like Daniel RPK. I also interviewed the director Brian Andrews and the head writer AC Bradley for What If, and I actually asked them about this. I asked if Peggy Carter showing up in the MCU in live action form is a possibility, and of course they couldn't give me an answer, but they both said that they're very hopeful and they would love to see that happen. And not to mention the executive producer Brad Windebaum in the press conference pretty much told us that yes, these characters can appear later on in the MCU in live action form. And of course, it's all thanks to the multiverse. Essentially anything is possible, even an animated character going into a live action universe. So if you love Peggy Carter, it looks like we could be getting more of her as Captain Carter down the road in live action form. So if you'd like to stay up to date on all MCU news, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. And now we'll dive into the breakdown of episode 1. Now, we start off by hearing the voice of Uatu the Watcher. And Uatu isn't the only Watcher. In fact, there are Watchers, an entire species of them. And in the comics, they're known as the oldest species in the universe. In fact, they're so ancient that the original name for the race has been forgotten. So they call themselves the Watchers based off of the tasks that they do, watching the universe. The Watchers are cosmic entities. They are extremely powerful. And as our Watcher says at the end of episode 1, he watches all, but he does not, and he cannot, will not interfere. The Watchers made this rule because originally they actually did interfere and try to help civilizations. However, this eventually led to some civilizations' destruction, thanks to nuclear weapons, so the Watchers simply watch and observe now. And it is their law that they cannot interfere. Now, Uatu actually does interfere in the comics. He's actually very close with the Fantastic Four, and he helps them out. Eventually, the Watchers would put him on trial, and they would eventually ban him. However, he would continue to watch Earth and was eventually reinstated. Now, our Watcher, Uatu in What If, is voiced by Jeffrey Wright, and he states the premise in the beginning. He explains that time, space, and reality aren't linear. They're a prism of endless possibilities in which one choice can branch out into infinite realities. Now, as he says this, the glass kind of breaks and we actually get little glimpses here of what's to come in future What If episodes. I am lucky enough to have seen the first 3, so I actually do recognize a few of these. In the first glass that breaks, we can see Doctor Strange on the right. Below him, we can see Tony Stark eating a donut from that Iron Man 2 scene. To his left, we can actually see T'Challa being picked up by Yondu. To the left of that, we see Red Skull, then Yondu, Killmonger, Proxima Midnight, which is going to come in the next episode, episode 2. Then above them, we can actually see Peggy Carter getting the serum. Above her, we can see Loki and his troops. And then right in the middle there, we can see Ramonda, the Queen of Wakanda. Above her, we can see Black Widow, and above her, we can see Steve Rogers. Then in the next glass, all the way on the right, we can see Karina, who was the slave to the Collector in Guardians of the Galaxy. She pops up in episode 2. To her left, of course, we see Captain Carter. Below her, Doctor Strange. Then to the left, it looks like Shuri, then we have Nick Fury, then we have T'Challa right before he's abducted. That's next episode as well. Above him is Iron Man, and then to the right we have T'Chaka and what looks to be Killmonger. Now from here we dive into what the episode is about. And to be quite frank, this really is Captain America the First Avenger, except instead of Captain America, it's Captain Carter. Of course, things don't go down exactly how they went down in the movie. They threw some nice twists at us, but the premise is pretty much the same. The Nazi army and Red Skull are marching across Europe and ultimately want to take over the world, while the rest of the allied countries come together to make a super soldier. Now, we know how the original version goes. Captain America the First Avenger, he gets the super soldier serum, becomes Captain America, and essentially ends the war. However, this is What If, and the What If is in the title of the episode. What if Captain Carter were the first Avenger? Now, this jumps right into when Steve Rogers is about to get the super soldier serum, and we meet Dr. Erskine and a military personnel that we haven't seen in the first Captain America the First Avenger movie. However, Agent Carter fans will recognize this person. This is John Flynn. However, in this What If episode, it's Colonel John Flynn, and he's actually modeled after and voiced by the actor who played John Flynn in Agent Carter, Bradley Whitford, and for the most part, he pretty much is the same character that he was in Agent Carter. A guy who doesn't really believe that a woman can really do much when it comes to war. And if you look closely, we can also see Colonel Phillips on the right, who was played by Tommy Lee Jones. Now from here, things get very different. Erskine says that Agent Carter would probably be more comfortable in the booth, and in the movie, she agrees and goes in the booth. However, things play out a little bit differently in the movie, as when he originally asked her this in Captain America the First Avenger, Steve is already on the table. Clearly not the same case here. And not to mention, John Flynn is not there. So Peggy refuses to go into the booth and she stays in the room, which is apparently the moment that created a new universe. Now from here, again, things play out a little bit differently than in the movie. In What If, the attack happens before Steve Rogers gets the serum. In the movie, it happens after. So in What If, a Hydra agent activates a bomb. From here, the agent runs up and he actually shoots Colonel Phillips. This is different from what happened originally. Originally, it was actually Dr. Erskine that got shot twice, and this resulted in his death. But that doesn't happen in What If, and the gunman continues to run towards Steve. Steve runs at him and the gunman shoots him 2 times. He attempts to steal the serum, but Peggy shoots him and kills him. But the program is already activated. They can't stop it, so they only have one chance to make a super soldier. Colonel Flynn tells Howard Stark to get in there, but Howard says no, that's not who he is, he's a scientist. And since Steve is shot, he can't go through with it, so of course Peggy takes the initiative and comes out a super soldier. And Flynn is pissed and he thinks they blew their only chance. He also says that the SSR is now under his command, which leads us to believe that Colonel Phillips actually died. We then cut to a scene of Peggy Carter punching a punching bag until she eventually punches it off the chains. And this is pretty much the exact same scene that we see at the very end of Captain America the First Avenger in the second post-credit scene. After Steve Rogers was frozen for 70 years, he is finally alive in the real time. To relieve some stress, he starts punching a punching bag just like Peggy did until eventually he punches it off the chains. But in What If, it's Peggy doing it and Steve's alive and standing right behind her. Then we get a little bit of a meta joke here. Steve says, well, it could be worse. Flynn could stick you on one of those USO tours, wear a crazy costume, being told to smile 10 times a day. Peggy says he wouldn't, he couldn't, could he? And Steve gives a little smirk because in another universe, in our main MCU timeline, that's what Steve Rogers did. He literally went on a USO tour, wore a spangly outfit, and smiled 10 times a day. So a little nod to the main timeline there. Then we have another node to the main timeline. Steve tells Peggy, I never was much of a dancer anyways, and she says, maybe you haven't found the right partner. This is similar to what she says in Captain America the First Avenger when she's talking to Steve and Bucky is standing beside her. She says, after this is done, I might go dancing, in which Bucky replies, what are we waiting for? And she says, the right partner. So from here, Red Skull gets the Tesseract in the same way he does in the movie Captain America the First Avenger. Peggy and the team find out that Red Skull has it and that it's on its way to Berlin, but Colonel Flynn doesn't want to send anybody after it because he thinks it's an overglorified battery. However, Howard Stark knows what it truly can do, and of course, he decides to go behind Flynn's back. But not before giving Peggy Carter her vibranium Captain Carter shield. From here we see Captain Carter's true abilities, and it does seem like she is pretty OP. Now of course it's animation, which allows for a lot more cooler things to take place, and they do a pretty amazing job. The fight sequences here are pretty fantastic, and they did a really good job at making them humorous. So Captain Carter kicks everybody's butt, gets the Tesseract back, and takes Dr. Zola hostage. This is very different than what happens in Captain America, and this is where the whole what if scenario is playing out very differently. If Agent Carter got the serum, she would have gotten the Tesseract back, which leads to these upcoming events of Steve Rogers piloting an Iron Man, essentially, powered by the Tesseract. But not before Agent Carter gets an upgrade to Captain, and so she officially becomes Captain Carter. And from here, a plan is hatched to go save Bucky, but not before Peggy says, "You owe me a dance." Again, bringing us back to Captain America, the first Avenger. Peggy very casually runs up next to a motorcycle, knocks the guy off and takes it, and does some stunts that we wish we could see live, but are still pretty cool in animation. She breaks out the 107th with ease, and this time Bucky has it easy. This time he's just in the prison cell with the rest of the 107th, but in the movie he was actually being tortured by Zola. Captain Carter busts them out, the door kicking open with her shield, mirroring the iconic scene from Captain America where he did the same thing. Once they get out, Hydra ups their attacks a little bit and Peggy calls an air support, in which, unknown to her, Steve Rogers says he's inbound, and he shows up in what I'm going to call the very first Iron Man suit, what they call the Hydra Stomper, and this thing is powered by the Tesseract, and this is something that couldn't have happened in Captain America the First Avenger because they never got the Tesseract. This is obviously a huge change from the main sacred timeline. It looks like Peggy Carter becoming Captain Carter, instead of Steve Rogers becoming Captain America, started the Iron Man suit with Howard Stark and not Tony Stark. And since Steve's new suit is powered by the Tesseract, it is very, very strong, and him and Captain Carter make waste of Hydra very, very easily. And there is a little reference to the original Captain America here. Dugan says, so a dame and a flying Buick. Okay. In Captain America, when the 107th escape, Dugan gets in an enemy tank and he says that it's a little different than a Buick. Now from here, Peggy, Steve, and Bucky start to take down a lot of Hydra squadrons. And we get a little montage here, much like we got in Captain America the First Avenger when he does the same thing. However, in this one, Steve Rogers has the Hydra Stomper. And we get some pretty dang cool scenes here of Captain Carter riding the Hydra Stomper in the middle of the sky, jumping off of it, destroying planes, and then jumping right back on. Now from here, Red Skull pretty much goes down the same path, getting away from Hitler, deeming himself a god and above man. Meanwhile, Peggy says that she loves a good whiskey, but she can't feel the side effects, aka get drunk, because of the serum. This is also what Steve said after he was drinking after he lost Bucky in Captain America. Peggy talks to Steve about finally being heard and respected. Steve says he's still the skinny kid from Brooklyn, now just in an iron suit, but Peggy says that he's her hero, and he says the same about her. They're about to kiss when, of course, Howard Stark comes out of nowhere and interrupts them. We then have many scenes that are actually very similar to what happened in Captain America with a few twists on them. We go to the train scene where the 107th is zip-lining down with Peggy at front. Steve goes to stop the train with the Hydra Stomper. The team lands on the train, but Bucky slips and he almost falls off just like he did in Captain America, but Peggy is there to catch him. He then makes a joke about how Peggy almost ripped his arm off, which of course is the arm that he actually loses during the scene in the actual movie. Of course, it would then later get replaced by metal and then ultimately vibranium. But it looks like if Peggy Carter goes on to become Captain Carter, Bucky actually never becomes the Winter Soldier. Instead, the train is actually a trap and the person they end up losing is Steve. At least, so they think. And a lot of people thought that this would have been a pretty good opportunity to make Steve the Winter Soldier, and I do agree that would have been cool, but the focus of this episode is Captain Carter. And here's where things start to get a little bit different. They have Dr. Zola captive, and he tells Peggy Carter everything. And we find out that Red Skull wants to use the Tesseract to unleash an interdimensional being. That will of course lead Hydra to world domination. The 107th is in to go and attack Hydra for Steve Rogers and of course to save the world. Captain Carter busts in the Hydra base pretty easily thanks to her super soldier serum. Bucky and the rest of the 107th backing her up until they eventually split up to go and find Red Skull. Howard Stark goes with Captain Carter, and here we have kind of a funny scene. Howard Stark asks, which way are we going? Captain Carter says, that way, in which Howard replies, should we not have a plan? Peggy says, who needs a plan? I have a shield, and Howard Stark says, a shield is not a plan. This is basically a reverse situation of what happens between Captain America and Tony Stark in the first Avengers film, except the roles are actually reversed. Iron Man is about to jump out of the Quinjet, in which Captain America says, we need a plan of attack, and Tony says, I have a plan, attack. This is just reversed. In our case, the Stark is the reserved one that wants to have a plan, and the Captain is the one that says, I have a shield, I don't need a plan. Very clever on Marvel's part. However, Captain Carter rethinks the whole needing a plan aspect when she sees that Red Skull summoned with the Tesseract what he refers to as his Hydra champion. Now this really does seem to be Shumagorath. We don't see an eye, but we do see the tentacles. Now some people may think that this is a Hydra, but Hydras have heads. A Hydra is a sea monster with multiple heads, and when you cut off one head, more will grow back in its place. That's a typical Hydra, and it doesn't have tentacles. And Shumagorath is an interdimensional being, which means that in What If, the Tesseract could definitely bring him into that universe. And it becomes very clear that Hydra has absolutely no control over it, as it immediately kills Red Skull. Meanwhile, Bucky and the boys find Steve and they get him back into the Hydra Stomper. However, it is no longer powered by the Tesseract, so its energy isn't unlimited, and it was simply attached to a generator to give it some power. Meanwhile, Howard Stark is trying to reverse the portal, however, all of the buttons are in German. And he actually makes a reference to a famous Austrian actress here, Hedy Lamarr. She was an Austrian-born American actress who appeared in over 30 films. Since she's Austrian-born, he makes the joke that they spent a weekend together, but she never taught him German. But it is established that Howard Stark, much like his son, is a playboy. Now, Peggy ends up picking up a sword, which is kind of interesting because Hydra originally is secretly running S.H.I.E.L.D. When they eventually find that out and S.H.I.E.L.D. disbands, they start S.W.O.R.D. So her picking up a sword at Hydra base could be something that they're trying to do here. Very meta if they are trying to do it. Now, Howard eventually ends up reversing the portal, and the portal starts to suck what I'm gonna call Shumagorath back inside. However, its tentacles latch on to the portal and keep it from going all the way in. Peggy starts to push the monster back in, but Steve comes to save the day. However, unfortunately, the Hydra Stomper runs out of energy and falls to the ground. And we basically get a reverse of what happens in Captain America. Instead of Steve having to put the plane inside of the water, we have Peggy having to go through the portal to stop the monster from invading the planet. But the dialogue is pretty much the same. Steve says, "You owe me a dance lesson," just like he says, "I have to take a rain check on that dance" in Captain America. In Captain America, Peggy Carter says, "next Saturday," and in this episode of What If, Peggy Carter says, "Saturday night." And then she's gone, and Steve Rogers is there, left with the Tesseract. However, fast forward 70 years, instead of Steve Rogers being stuck in the ice for 70 years, Peggy Carter was stuck inside of a different dimension for 70 years. Just like a portal was opened in the very first Avengers film and Loki came out, the same thing happens here, except Peggy Carter comes out. And it looks like time maybe didn't actually go by wherever she was, because tentacles fly out right when she comes out. And to her, it doesn't really seem like any time has passed at all, because the first thing that she asks is, "Where's Steve Rogers?" And Hawkeye actually recognizes her. He tells Nick Fury, "Sir, that's Captain Carter." Nick Fury says the war ended almost 70 years ago and asks if she's going to be okay, and she says, "Of course, we won the war." And here we see how one difference can change an entire universe. And we're gonna see all of these different alternate universe stories in What If Season 1 and Season 2. So that's it for my Episode 1 breakdown of Marvel's What If. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Do you like it? Do you like the animation style? Or would you prefer them to stick to just regular live action? Let me know down below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want to stay up to date on everything. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.